The piece of advice that I would give to other people of color looking to break into this business is to find a mentor.
Have mentors that they can cry to, that somebody's that's gonna give them to them straight, and people that are gonna champion them because they've watched them mature and grow up as an individual.
Just persevere and be happy that you're actually doing something that you love and that you're passionate about.
Start at the bottom and work your way up, and you'll figure out how all the different aspects of the wine business go together.
Take courses on wine, in particular the WSET Wine Spirits Education Trust. Start there.
So much that goes into wine, and so if you really want to start a career there, you got to get that foundational education.
Here to introduce our panel and get the program flowing is going to be Jay Jackson. And he's known to millions around the world as the reporter Kurt Copley from NBC's Parks and Recreation. He's appeared in 50 major films and TV shows and with his career in Hollywood. From movies and films like Fast and Furious, Fast and Furious franchise, Battleship, ABC Scandal, Supergirl, and Oprah Winfrey Show, and many more. He's also the founder and producer of Wine News Noir, an online visual magazine that focuses on African American and white space. Jay holds a level 3 WSET. He worked for 25 years as a news reporter for ABC and CBS News, earning 2 Emmy Awards. Ladies and gentlemen, Jay Jackson.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to say it's true, Sonoma's better than Napa. This is my first time here in Sonoma.
No, let him say this last part. Say that one more time.
It's my first time here in Sonoma.
Yeah.
And it's better than Napa. Oh my God, I've had a great time. Everybody here has been so gracious to me. I've loved it. I've fallen in love with the place. So give yourselves a round of applause. That's been a great experience. Oh my God, I was with your chef last night. Oh my goodness. Just blew me away. So I am so thankful to everybody here in the Library Foundation and to Dennis and to everybody here who has just been open their hearts and arms to me. And I am so overwhelmed by it. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of that. But I could just overflow with all the graciousness that you guys have shown me. So thank you very much. I know we got a lot to get through, so I'm going to get right to it. As Eric, as you were saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And last night when we had this great dinner, Eric was very passionate about being the table. And, we have a special opportunity to set the table here in Sonoma. The future of America is a diverse future. And everything has to be diverse. So the wine world must be diverse. So what an opportunity to be the leaders of a diverse world. I mean, at the forefront of it. And this is where it starts. And you're going to be hearing from the people who are going to be the leaders of the future of the wine world and of this country. So that's the importance of today and the importance of hearing the words of these people. And it's an honor to be of the inaugural event. There's only one first time. You know what I mean? There's going to be a second annual and a fifth annual, and there's going to be 500, 10,000 people in the future at these events. Really. And award ceremonies and stadiums and parties and concerts and jazz. But there's only one first time, and that's us. That's great, I'm serious. And so thank you for recording this. It's a great honor to be part of it, okay? So we're going to start with the easy question first because it's important. And the question is how are we going to, get to know all of our panelists here. I'm just going to go right down the line. Okay, we're going to start with Danny down there. Then, okay, first question. What inspired you to pursue a career in the wine industry? And how did you get started in your current role in Sonoma County? Dan Glover.
Well, hi everybody.
I started, well, I got into it because it's really very simple. I remember loving some really high-end wines that I never could afford. And so I figured, you know what? I'm gonna learn how to afford them, and I'm gonna learn how to make them, so that way I don't have to afford them. And so even today, I can't afford some of the wines I make. But that's but yeah, I got started in 1998, when it was my first harvest at Clos du Bois Winery. Working on, I just got a harvest job, and they kept me on for a couple of years, and here I am.
So, can you say the question one more time?
Oh, sure you are. What inspired you to pursue a career in the wine industry, and how did you get started in your current role? Because you're at Silver Oak now, right?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, and thank you particularly to the Sonoma County Library, as well as the NAACP Sonoma chapter, and of course Dennis McCarter for inviting me. I just wanted to get that out the way. But I started my wine journey first and foremost during the pandemic, like a lot of people, is consuming a lot of wine. I mean, Break Yourself is off the charts.
Business was good.
Yeah, and I had just got back from a trip to South Africa where I met some black wine producers and a vineyard owner, a black woman. And she said to me, her number one consumer was black women in America. And I was like, wow, because she couldn't sell her wine in her country. So what that did is that allowed me to, kind of use my idle time in the pandemic to become a wine ambassador for Boisé collection. And I started that journey. And I launched Uncorked and Cultured as a media company to really share the stories of how black wine professionals as well as wine producers were actually here. And we needed to support them, and we needed to be conscious consumers. And so that was my start, and now I'm not only the executive director of the Association of African American Vintners, but I also moved to Sonoma to pursue a little bit of deeper education, and that's through an apprenticeship with Silver Oak. So I'm the second cohort. So I'm excited to be here to be able to bring all of those three things together and see what I can do here in Sonoma.
Jake, could you repeat the question again?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I just love your voice, man. Can you record my email, my voicemail message on the way out?
Okay.
I love the way this guy speaks.
Yeah, and and again, this is a question. It's a softball question. It's designed so we can just get to know how this all started. Then we'll get to some of the deeper questions. But what inspired you to pursue a career in the wine industry, and how did you get started in your current role in Sonoma County?
Oh wow! So truth. I don't feel like truth. You want truth? Truth. So I safe space. I wanted to impress chicks. I was 22 years old. I was a senior in college. I have a degree in what would now be considered data sciences, like how to write survey questions and do statistical analysis in an office building in San Francisco. Wasn't really feeling that. I wanted something interesting with my early 20s, something that's gonna make me seem more sophisticated, particularly as somebody who grew up in a non-drinking household in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Wine was not part of anything growing up, but having gone to college here in California, I had the opportunity to go to Stanford and kind of discover wine country, and kind of was like, wow, this wine's pretty cool. Like, what's this all about? And then kind of started tasting it and getting into it. And my mom actually moved up to Santa Rosa when I was in college, so I started going wine tasting when I'd come back for Christmas break and that. So kind of got into it. It's like, well, I didn't know people just did this. I thought wine all came from France, and this is a career that people actually like a job. So I was able, got my first job working in the lab at Sonoma back in 2003, and from there I started working at smaller family-owned wineries, including spending 6 years at Medlock Ames out in Alexander Valley. I reached a point in my career about 8 years into it where I'd kind of felt like I'd plateaued as someone who doesn't have a degree in winemaking. There weren't really the same career opportunities, so I started my own brand. Was like, I'll do this for a couple years and then kind of parlay the skills and show what I can do, show that I can make wine, I can do this process. And in my second vintage, I ended up making America's first sparkling Sauvignon Blanc
Woo!
Yeah. I love Sauvignon Blanc. I love bubbles. I couldn't find them at the store, so I said, what have you been doing for 8 years? You want to make wine? Then make one. Make it, bro. So I did, and that one particular product really took off. And I kind of realized like I had a whole business on my hands now, and that was something that I really committed to, versus something I was going to do and keep small and move on from. It became my full-time job in 2014, and have been kind of growing and progressing with that. Is both a winemaker and as a winemaker, business owner, and then also taking on roles in consulting for other people has been a really cool opportunity to do that. So that's kind of what got me here today.
I have so many follow-up questions. Don't we all? Like, yeah. I'm Brenae Royal. I'm currently the North Coast Operations Manager for the Gallo Winery in Sonoma. Home base for me is Monte Rosso Vineyard. I started as an intern back in 2013, but what made me interested in farming was the fact that I was one of 2 Black girls in FFA back in 2004. So I started raising pigs, and I stood out, and I learned from a very young age, not just in FFA, but in band and in sports, that when you're the only, it's usually a position of power, because more times than not, people introduce themselves to me already knowing my name. So being in FFA, I progressed really quick. I was traveling out to Indianapolis and DC with the national team. I got an academic scholarship to go to Chico State under animal science. However, I could not kill the pigs. Like, I was always trying to say pigs. I still eat bacon, so it just wasn't a good look. So I switched to horticulture and crop science, and through college, I worked 40 hours a week with a full course load. So by the time I got to my senior year, like, a good time was like pasta, Jeopardy, a puzzle, and Apothic Red. And me and my best friend were making that Safeway store profitable. But at the time, I was trying to explore what I wanted to do next, and I was looking at a master's in international ag development at Davis because I figured I would teach agriculture. But then I made it to my last career fair, and Gallo had a faux magnum of Apothic, and I just started screaming, and I was like, look, I want to do it. I'm not really cut out for the Peace Corps. I mean, look at me, like, come on. And so they gave me a 2-hour interview in Healdsburg. I remember I left Chico at like 4 a.m. and I made it here by 8. And they hired me a week after graduating as the viticulture operations intern. So, yeah. So I've been with Gallo for 11 years now, and I've been progressing pretty rapidly, and I was actually promoted to this role 5 days before I gave birth to my son. So it's been a very fun ride, and again, I hope in this conversation people start to change their perspective of being the only, because it is a position of power if you know how to finesse.
Hold on there. And Rosalind, what inspired you to pursue your career in the wine industry, and how did it get started in your current role here in Sonoma County?
So I started off as the wife, and that was 27 years ago. Almost nobody believes that, but it really was. We purchased this property. It was a 30-acre dilapidated apple orchard. We said, oh, we'll put some grapes in, and maybe the property will start to take care of itself at some point in the future. And we kept adding. Opened the production facility in 2008. I opened the tasting room in 2014. This is actually the 10-year anniversary of opening the tasting room. Totally amazing. And by the time, somewhere around 2010, that power equilibrium started to tip, and I am now the primary owner here, and plan to be full owner by the end of this year. And I don't know if that's crazy or just like, I got this, you know. It just depends on the day. But I'm loving what I'm doing. It's very hard. Some days I wish I could just be out in the vineyard, you know. But there's so many aspects to selling wine and getting your wines where they need to be. And I think if there's anything that I want to get across to African American winemakers and diverse winemakers is that it's not putting it in the bottle, it's actually getting those bottles out the cellar door. And we have to make sure we understand that. So that's my role, getting it out the cellar door. That's it. I have them right here. And I actually have a little promo for today, you guys. It's right there on there, so you guys.
We love a promo.
That's what my people said. But yeah, talk to me. Thank you.
Okay, Angela, I want to ask you this next question, and then we'll go around the horn. How do you see the role of Black professionals evolving in the wine industry? And what changes would you like to see in terms of representation and opportunities?
Good question. I'm going to start with the latter, and then I'll go to the first. I see as far as the changes and the roles when it comes to the wine industry, primarily is seeing more people of color in leadership roles. I think what ends up happening is, especially working my first harvest, and you go into the tasting rooms, you see the wine atmosphere and the culture, and you see a lot of vineyard workers, right? And they all look the same. It's like two sides of the industry. It's the workers, the laborers, and then it's like the back of the house and the front of the house, kind of like if you were like in theater or what have you. And so what I would like to see is to see more inclusivity of like leadership roles going up to the top. So that way we can see the Latinx community as well as the Black community being leaders and really innovate the industry. Right now, you go to Unified Symposium, you go to all these different, think tank conversations and conferences. I went to Portugal and they're all saying the same thing, which is, the 65-year-old demographic that everybody's trying to target is not sustainable. And we need to start looking at more diverse audiences. We got to look at more people that of color, that are older, that are younger. That are more younger, that are from different backgrounds, different cuisines. And so, holistically, I would like to see that pipelines and opportunities and collaborations for more smaller people of color owned producers to work with larger distribution companies and larger, maybe even producers, to provide them with the grapes, to provide them with the resources and to scale their businesses, as opposed to just keeping it, divided.
Dan, what are your thoughts on that subject?
Let's see. Well, what I would like to see, I think what I'd like to see is, I'm gonna kind of be more on the production side, because that's basically all I know. But I would like to see, like Angela said, more people either working for favorite companies, being the winemaker, being, being the winemaker, being the person in charge. I'd like to see more folks owning their own businesses, being entrepreneurs and growing. Because I think if the more diversity that we have in producing, and then the more diversity we can create of consumers, which I think is really important.
One of the things, though, that Dr. Monique Bell, you guys familiar with Dr. Monique Bell? She wrote the great research paper called Terra Noir in 2020. Her follow-up was in 2023 that first pointed out that 1% of the wine community is African American, only 1%. And capital was the number one problem. How do we get capital? Chris.
How do we get capital?
How do we get access to
I
capital?
know, I saw somebody with an exchange bank name tag on his.
Bank. Oh.
And then Rosalind after that.
Okay, access to, I was really hoping to answer the last question. No, that's one of the really tricky things about capitalist industry, because wineries in general aren't profitable. They're bad investments. My wife works in SBA lending. You hear stories about this. And even some of the quests that I've been on to capitalize my business has been a struggle. With that, just because of the stigma around wineries, it's a really tough business to be in. So that's kind of part of it, the nature, independent of race. There's the issue of just wineries themselves. It's a really tricky business to be in, because so much of the value and success you have is not really about the inputs and costs that go into the bottle, but it's the perceived value. So you're trying to do something as quantitative as finance with a product that's as qualitative as wine. It's kind of a really strange thing. from a lending perspective, you know? And then also when it comes to getting money, it's so stigmatized through lending, like being a winery, it's all like, you know, people have money. It's a risky investment in it. So, you know, you kind of have to start, you know, what it looks like through traditional lending channels. It'd probably be more the line of, you know, finding ways or finding investment groups and private equity to microfinance wineries, help people get started. And, you know, I look at what it costs to do. I probably couldn't start Bodkin wines today with the resources I did 11 years ago when I did it. You know, I started my brand with $13,000 and an advance on 2 credit cards, rolled over to a third, 0% APR for a year.
What was that percent?
It was insane. Like, you know, history's written by the victors, so I could say I had this great dream and it all worked out, but that's not true. That was the naivete and ambitions of a much younger Chris that got lucky along the way. So yeah, capital is going to be tough, you know, for any business to be in. But really getting together people to pool resources and come up with like alternate methods of finance, I think, is really what our future looks like here. People who are really understanding the risk that involves in lending to a winery and really want to go, you know, advocate for the culture by lending to persons of color. So I think that's probably the way that can help wineries best get capital, by setting up alternative sources of financing.
Rosalind, your thoughts on this? Because I mean, you know, we can see the data. White-owned wineries get what, 4 times more access to capital than black wineries of color? So, you know, while the machine is there for us to get capital, there's still discrimination in the industry. You know, the mechanisms are there, but the discrimination is there as well. So, your thoughts on this?
Oh, can I start with prayer?
And not to laugh at that, that's definitely right.
So what's really interesting about that is that this is a unique position I'm in at this year, that I'm looking to take over full ownership of this property by the end of the year. And there are certain pieces that I have to put in place. I am very lucky that this property was purchased 27 years ago. Okay, we could not, you could not even think about being able to purchase, you know, basically now what we purchased for 1 acre, I mean, what we purchased 30 acres for, you pay for 1 acre.
Wow.
I mean, just to put that in perspective. So I am really lucky to have that much equity in this land. So I do expect to be able to raise the amount of money that I need to take over full ownership of the property. But you know, when I have a wonderful lawyer, and he's like, you can do this, you can do this. I'm like, but no, I'm just a poor little black girl from the from the ghetto. How do I go from there to that? He says, you can get this done, and I do believe it can be done, but it has to be done systematically. You have to, your finances have to be in order. You've got to show how you're going to get from here to there, and you can't overlook that public perception, because often what's sold is the private equity or whatever, is what is being sold is what they think it's worth, or what they think it could be worth, because it's not really going to be that on paper. You know, that you're selling something else. So you need to, for me, I'm putting together a team to make that happen. So you need the right people in the right places, and visibility. A lot of us don't have that visibility, and it's extremely difficult to understand how to get to that. So that's not the scientific financial end, but I think that's really closer to the reality, because there's too many wineries that have gone incredibly, and what? How is that worth $300 million? He just sold a label.
Yep.
Right.
He didn't have any land. He didn't own any grapes, but that he had the potential with that label to turn it into something else, and that's what we really have to move away from, not having that and moving toward let's remake ourselves in that mode, if that makes sense, because you're really selling something far more than what's on that piece of paper as far as the finances.
Dan, your thoughts on this? I know you have.
It's always hard. I think it's always going to be a little harder being a minority. but you know, I've never really gotten financing. I've never really asked for it. I've really just kind of started from bare bones, ground up. So I've just built my business slowly, and it's still small. It's still very, very small. But I think if we're going to figure out how to get more funding, more financing, more so more folks can get into this, and more people can build the existing businesses that they have, that we got to start thinking a little, like kind of what Chris was alluding to. We got to start thinking a little more outside the box and start finding different avenues and different sources. So that's kind of Jay, that would probably be a really good its own symposium to have.
Yes.
You know, is to like, what's outside the box? Where can we figure this out? And how do we go about it?
Can I just mention something? So Constellation Brands, to both of their points, Constellation Brands, or Constellation Ventures actually, so it's a subsidiary of Constellation, they actually committed, I think it was $2 million towards creating opportunities for Black and people of color. And 2 of our members actually benefited from that. And they got some really good injections of money into their businesses that helped them scale. It also got them connected with key distributors, right? Major national distributors. So that's really helpful. And, one of the things that AAAV's done to really help with that is we created the AAAV Wine Entrepreneurship Grant, where we've given 5 of our members $5,000 grants towards their businesses. And so being able to get fundraising of that, getting, donations from corporations, individuals, or individual donors to really help, that can be an alternative, pathway for some of our members. We're starting at 5,000, but my goal is to be able to provide 25,000, if the funding is there. And so, creating programs and funding opportunities and campaigns for specifically to Black wine producers is going to be a great opportunity for small businesses to get, whether it's just getting barrels or paying for the bottles for for a vintage. Like, it's just, those things add up. I mean, that $5,000 that our members received really helped one of our members get into Whole Foods.
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to be asking all the questions here. Do we have any questions from the audience? And talk nice and loud for us.
Opportunity for the producers to, I don't know what the word is, but like make joint purchases. So you could buy barrels in volume if there was the right networking available. Is that opportunity?
Well, that's something that we've definitely been exploring since I've become the executive director. That's been one of my key kind of like strategies, moving forward. It's just building those relationships and identifying which of these suppliers are really invested and going to put their money where their mouth is and going to give us the good deals. Our founder, Mac McDonald, who was mentioned earlier, he started the organization here in Sonoma County, and he had a major support. I want to say with Chuck Wagner, and he helped get subsidize some of his resources for his his winery when he started. So those type of intentional efforts is what's needed. And so we're still me personally, I'm still building those relationships. We all are, and so it takes, I think, that thinking along and that support to really help make a difference. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm old, so this may be interesting. 500 years ago when I was in college, we drank a lot of things. Wine was not one of them. Even cheap wine we couldn't afford. So my question to you really is, how are you getting to Black people to drink wine? We've been talking about the other. What are you doing to get Black people before they get to their 50s to start drinking wine? And I know it sounds like a joke, but it's really not.
It's real.
Say there's a lot of marketing behind it. When I started just 11 years ago, everyone, and I still get treated like this unicorn. And so when I'm talking to, I don't know, it's one of the answers I was hopeful to give, but it's showing up to tables that are for us. Not every table is for us, so we're not going to show up just because it's there. But I love doing events like this. I love doing the event that I did yesterday, which was the 13th annual Black Vines. But it is meeting our community face to face. I work for Gallo, so everybody hears that and goes, okay, what? And so how do I bring that aspect to our lives? And especially like my family, like they drink Pete Bella to this day, and I'm like, oh my God. But it is that marketing piece of putting us in front of people and showing that we are here and that these stereotypes that are in wine can be debunked pretty quick, but you're gonna trust it coming from me versus a white person or somebody that doesn't look like you. That inherent bias is very, very beneficial and is incredible with getting you to at least try something in this category. And there's so much wine. You may not like what I'm producing, but you're gonna like Rosalind's. And so there's something for all of us, but I would say the marketing piece is gonna be huge to show our community that they can trust into this category and spend their hard-earned dollars on what we are here providing, and then to open the opportunity to your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. You can show them, oh, here's a profession that you may not have even thought was for you. Look at all these great people who have been successful in it and who have started from the ground up. Some people here have started from the ground up. I started from the ground up within a company, and now I'm a manager. And so there are opportunities, but you want to hear it from me before you hear it from somebody else, to trust that what I'm giving you is real because I'm in it, is what I think is.
No, actually,
I was gonna say share the stories. Everything she's saying, share it. Like today.
so one of the things I have really put a focus on the past couple of years is working with other African Americans who are out there wanting to do their own projects. And have been told no by a lot of people, you know? I mean, a lot of the consulting work I do is people they make their way to me because they've been told no by other people. I have a bit of reputation for the guy who will, oh, you're the guy who made sparkling Sauvignon Blanc when nobody else did. You can do anything, right? And I'm like, I don't know. But I'll listen, what's your plan?
Yeah.
And through this kind of network of people, I've had a couple other African Americans come to me, and I've been able to make wine for them that were really tailored towards the African American community. I'm not sure if any of y'all watch Love and Marriage Huntsville. Watchers in there. Yeah, dude. So,
What is it?
March. Go ahead. So I had an opportunity to work with Martell Holtz on his wine project. So for those who know Martell from the blogs or Real Housewives of Atlanta, I had an opportunity to make wine for him.
Charades?
Yes. I mean, I was used to be the most handsome brother in the room, except for this room. And then this guy walks in looking like Tay Diggs had a baby with Tyrese. I'm not trying to focus during this beat. I'm being like, but he had an idea. Like, he knows his following, largely female, and wanted to make a sweet red wine, but he wanted to make a luxury wine. And a lot of people told him no for that. That's not going to work. People don't want that. And I was like, no, this guy knows his audience. Like, he knows it, he knows his following. And I'm like, yes, I want to help you make this happen. So it was a really cool process to work with him on that and make a red wine that was 38 grams per liter residual sugar. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
But it was good. It's not the clothes we wear, it's how we wear it.
Okay.
And that was part of the challenge with it and embracing this, because a lot of people think that works. Well, it tasted good.
You only get better.
38.
That was one for it. And I also had an opportunity to work with another gentleman by the name of Jerry Bailey. Pull your phones out right now. Look up Ayaba, A-Y-A-B-A.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was, you see him there.
Yeah.
I made those.
Okay.
I did Jerry's wines.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he's a brother based out of Oakland that knows his audience. Like, he's like, I want to make sangria, tailored towards African American female population. Like, knows his audience. And it's like, to make a peach flavored rosé, like a strawberry watermelon rosé flavored wine, and then like a red berry sangria, and do these 3 wines for him because he knew his audience. I'm like, I want to do this. This is our moment for Black excellence. Like, this is a wine that people aren't really going to give you the time and effort to make, and it's not an easy thing to do, to make a flavored wine product, ostensibly a wine cooler. But it was a lot of time and effort and trial and error and tasting back and forth to make these products. So one thing that I'm doing to help get wine out there is working with other African American vintners and brand owners to help them achieve their goals in the wine industry, because they're making wines, people from in the community making wines for the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's all these awesome opportunities for Black excellence. Oh no, it's moderating. I saw a hand go up in the back.
Rosso, did you want?
It was two things. What you're saying, absolutely, we need to be inclusive and we need to bringing other African Americans together to make things. We could do that.
Yeah.
You and I could do that.
I'm here.
I have a new label. It'd be fun to put that in there. But I also want to make sure that when you say know your audience, recognize, as we are, that our audience isn't just people of color. Okay, I need people of all hues to come into this room and love my wine.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if it's anything that as I'm working through this year with marketing, trying to find the right marketing company and figure out how we move forward, is identifying those demographics that are going to be the best. And that's so tricky. I mean, that's not something that comes easily. So let's not just think we need just people of my hue. We need people of all hues. And we need to be building our markets in that way.
Let me ask the gentleman who asked that question, which is a very important question. Did you get the answer you wanted?
Never really.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's not easy.
I'm looking for
Yeah.
the kid who is 18, 19, and
Well, we can't sell
21.
anything to him.
21.
So can I s-
21.
But finish. I want to hear what you have to say.
21 outside. 21 outside. 21 outside.
But sir, please finish. I am very interested in what you're saying.
well, we couldn't sell 18 or 19-year-old beer and liquor either, but somehow or another they always got drunk. But
I'm talking about
point is,
18 drinking age.
it's real basic. So now that kid is 21, but he doesn't think about wine until he or she becomes 45, 50. And they could have lived in Santa Rosa most of their life. And I'm just wondering, and I'm taking way too long, how do we find
We
them
bridge that.
before they
Yeah.
become 50 years old?
Jay, can I just speak to that? So there are organizations that are targeting younger demographics, going into universities, under 21, like the Roots Fund, they do kind of like an educational piece where they're in like I think it was like an internship program or things of that sort, where they're trying to really like educate them on winemaking as a career, through the agricultural programs at different HBCUs, the grape growing and learning how to work in the lab, like from the STEM standpoint, from a career pipelining side of it. But also social media has a huge boom in demographic of younger people in their early 20s, and mid 30s primarily, that are like talking about the wine, talking about Black winemakers, talking about their wine, how they're traveling and going to vineyards and stuff like that. So there is a ripple effect that's happening now, but I think to really make that young, demographic more activated at a younger age is sharing the stories, like as parents, being able to say, this is a career opportunity, this is a viable career opportunity. I mean, I think Brenae gave a perfect example of how she, was breaking down barriers as a young Black woman at a young age. I mean, she's a unicorn in the wine industry, essentially, you know what I mean? And nobody's had it, and you just figured it out, right?
Yeah, I will say it is the storytelling piece, it's the marketing piece. Like, that 21-year-old needs to see us. And I just came out of a really big marketing seminar, and the focus on Gen Z is not wine. It's like a wine spritzer. It's some kind of spirit that has wine, like a wine cocktail, and it's something Instagrammable. It's something TikTokable. It's something with 38 grams of sugar, with Sheree's ex, Atlanta Housewives. It's something like that. And then if you're trying to go on the luxury side, or maybe now I'm spending triple digits, it's that authenticity piece. I'm working on a project that's coming directly off my vineyard, and I am the focal point of like, who is this Black woman leading this 138 historic vineyard? And I'm literally sitting down with people, giving personal touches so that somebody feels like they're in the vineyard with me and my dog and my son and my team. So for the Gen Z aspect, it isn't wine, this beautiful, Pinot Noir out of Crest. It's a wine spritzer that I can find in that It's probably got multiple colors on it, and it's gonna look good, and it's gonna say something like vibes, and it's gonna be ridiculous, but it's something that's fun. And then on the other end, it's something that really speaks, because Gen Z has zero issues spending money. But if you are not authentic, if you don't have an integrity behind the story and the product that you're making, they will cut you off pretty quick.
Yeah.
So there's sides to it, but that 21-year-old primarily needs to know that we exist.
Right.
So I apologize for not answering as well as I probably could
And
have.
that's a great question, and I know there's a lot more to explore there. But we have another question in the back there. Thank you for that question, Brett. Sister in the back there.
Thank you. This leads into his question. I think that when we think about wine and the regions it comes from, it often is matched with the foods and the culture of the place of origin, right? Chilean wines match with those foods, Spanish wines match with the foods in Spain. When we talk about our culture and our food and our taste buds, I think there is space for that. How do you see that being possible in an elevated way? So it's not 38% sugar,
Yeah.
but it is something that pairs with the tastes and
Yeah.
the foods and the flavors and the heat.
No, that's a really interesting point you brought up there. And I was trying to ask that question for a minute, and I was like, I can't wait to hear your question. She's been working on this for a while. And this question is not disappointing. This is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. That dovetails into it. So I took a DNA test, found out that African Americans have a certain propensity or increased sensitivity to bitterness. And I read that, and all of a sudden it's like the gears in my head start turning. I look at my own preferences in wine, avoiding things that are both bitter and astringent. I mean, even the way that I drink coffee, it's like I'm mixing that coffee until it's lighter skinned than I am, so they can't tell the difference between the cup and my hand. I mostly drink white wine, sparkling wine. My favorite wine that I've made my entire career so far is a dessert wine. Hey, I'm into what I'm into. It doesn't make me less of a winemaker and all that. So I think kind of understanding that there is this, like even on a genetic level, within the community of people of African descent, a sensitivity towards bitterness, that is going to kind of have an impact on the wines that we all tend to have a tendency to gravitate towards. And it's hard not to ignore that in a community. So, things that are not going to be bitter tends to be sweeter. Like that's where on the flavor spectrum. So this idea of African American preferring sweeter wines, there's legitimately a genetic component of that. Mm-hmm. So it's understanding that, and like even when it comes to white wines, like I realized that one of the things that defined my career and the white wines I've made is my personal sensitivity to phenolic bitterness. Making sure the grapes aren't pressed too hard. You're keeping the wines nice, crisp, fresh, and really aromatic and expressive. It's a big thing in my winemaking due to my own personal sensitivity to it. So I think there is a way of making wines that are more fruit forward. Not necessarily sweeter in terms of RS, but even using grapes and doing them in a dry method like Muscat Canelli, which I've done on and off since 2012 for my own personal joy, more so than the revenue it's brought in. Kind of a loss leader for me, but so why not love it? Not enough that it's going to completely upset the ship, but I think that's kind of part of the outreach is like really catering wines, not necessarily in the gratuitously over the sweet or everyone goes for Moscato, but a tendency of making wines to a community that are lighter, refreshing, easier drinking, more approachable, I think is part of it.
The second part of that question is, do you think it's just an opportunity of more education
Yes.
within the community of wider palates?
There are levels
Absolutely.
to sweetness. So I think first things first, you gotta make people stop being ashamed of saying I like sweet wine.
Nothing wrong with it.
Like there's nothing wrong with I'm not drinking Moscato. But somebody out there is. But to Chris's point, like if you get into the weeds with it, it's genetically a flavor profile that we prefer. And there are levels to sweetness. So when somebody says I want a sweet wine, like now I'm gonna start to see like what kind of sweetness are you talking about? Because dry wines will be sweet. So like
Fruit forward and sweetness, the difference between the two, like how they express them, it comes down to nomenclature, which starts by people learning the terminology, tasting a lot. Like no one's born knowing anything about wine. I don't care what these fifth, sixth generation of our family has worked the wine since he was deeded to us from the King of France. Whatever they're saying in France, you can be born in that chateau, but you learn wine just like everybody else from birth.
Maybe a little earlier than other people.
Maybe a little bit earlier because they got their half and half kids wine mixed at the table, but.
first things first, it's like making you feel comfortable enough to say I like sweet wine and not feeling like you
They
gotta
get put on
shut
blast for it.
Yeah.
And I think where you start with wine is not where you need to end with wine. If you start tasting something, people will come in and they're a little nervous, and I'll say, well, rosé is the easiest, honestly, to get because it is very fruit forward. but ours is completely dry. People are slightly surprised by that. But then as they start to, and this is the way I learned, because I married a man that was a wino, so I had to catch up. But I started with the softer wines, and then you start to move out, and you find things that you like that you had no idea. I love Gewürztraminer, right? Okay, I mean, and it's and there's this alcohol smell that comes with that. That if you just smell the alcohol, you would never drink that wine. But you start to learn, oh, I love this, and then you go here, and then you can go anywhere from there. And you just have to, for me, I just try to make people comfortable in feeling and thinking what they do about wine, and telling them, trust what you feel, and then move from there and try to get outside that box. And it always works to one extent or another. But I have to tell you, in my early years of standing behind tables around this country and Canada, I did cringe when they'd come up and ask me for sweet wine. I remember one time in Wichita, the guy was drunk, and he stood there, he goes, "You got any sweet wine?" And I was like, no. But as time goes on, you do get past that. So.
The young lady in the green.
I just want to go follow up question with this gentleman, because he asked a question and it was so kind of trying to resonate with me. He was saying how generational back then, it was hard for us to get into the wine business. And for me, as an adult now, I grew up in church, and most of my generation grew up in church. So I always associated wine, like Jesus,
Sacraments.
Grape juice. So I didn't understand the concept of wine or my parents or my generation before us. So I never knew what wine tastes like until I was 30, because as a Christian, we weren't introduced to wine like that. So I think that's the reason why, even for the Black community or Black religious people and parents, my parents would never talk to me about wine because it's a religious thing. We don't talk about that in this house, but I think it's revered on Christmas time. So that has always been one of those conversations that you never have with your parents, because it's a religious concept of wine, but the wine itself was, fruit juice or whatever. So now that we know what wine is in our community, I think it's really important for us to separate the two. This wine is no alcohol, and there's adult wine that you can drink, and we can market that as a business. So that's kind of what I got to take away from these questions about why we never grew up in wine.
So approachable education, starting with the youth via social media, kind of demystifying wine, the whole stigma that wine is a religious thing or it's a white thing and it's not, we're part of the community. Kind of getting to kids before they believe these kind of false ideas that wine is not part of our culture. So kind of things to get them going earlier is that. And it comes with a lot of information, because as people learn more, they taste more. As you taste more, you get more confident in anything.
We'll also look at history.
Yeah.
In American history, Black people were probably making the first wine.
We're the first vineyard workers for Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, so we were making wine
And Native American.
way before white people were in this country, probably. So that's, you start with there, and then, you go and, you work towards, you really try to have to gear towards finding the folks that have their, like for example, you have your 40, 50-year-olds who have kids. And now these 40, 50-year-olds are starting to get into wine because they have disposable income. Because I know in my 20s I didn't have any disposable income. So, so therefore you start, then their kids get into it because they're drinking it at the dinner table. And so is it going to take a little longer for the African community to catch up with other communities? Yeah. But you know what? We're doing it. And it's starting and it's happening. I see it all over the place. And it's slowly happening. And we just got to keep our foot on the gas pedal and, keep promoting like everybody else does. And, we have to do the marketing. We have to do the legwork. We have to hustle. We probably have to hustle more than a lot of other people have to hustle. So I think that's what's, what we all of us here in Venice, we're all doing. That's, so that's, I think that it's encouraging to see we will have growth. It's just a matter of we just got to keep going and doing this.
You had a question down here?
just feel like I have-
This, you had a question?
Oh, gosh, we were way on another subject then, let's see. Yeah, actually.
Thank you, Dan, thank you.
These two ladies and I have all shared exchange students over the last 15 years from all different countries, all different. And one of the common themes is when they're 16, they have wine at their table with their family. And all of a sudden, they're all over here with all these rules. They can't have wine, and they're actually treated different because they're from another country. And that always seemed to me like a market where you could start with young people, educating, getting parents, it's okay if it's a family dinner, you have your exchange student, you have your own teenagers, to include them in that, so they don't have to say, may I have the excuse and go get drunk in the backyard. You know, they can have a little wine, little champagne with Sauvignon Blanc, sparkling.
They should. Something about sparkling.
We should make it available to
I agree.
16-year-olds with the family, I guess.
I agree. Yeah,
And our exchange students from other parts of the world does that.
right, exactly.
How has climate change and the environment changed your production, and what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet.
Oh, in the conversation. Oh, I'll.
The question I got.
Oh. How has climate change affected production? So before I get into that, and this may be a real unpopular opinion, but I'm supported by Rosalind here to say it. But I think there are two things that have to happen within our community is we are up here doing the work and making ourselves available for education. But I know as Black people, we know what we know, and we are not always very curious. So when you see something that previously wasn't meant for us because it wasn't in our social, economic situation or whatever, there's a stigma with the generation before us and even before them that just wasn't our drink. So there has to be with these, especially now as a mom, like there has to be this new sense of curiosity that everything is for me if I want it to be. So I think within our community, get curious, because as Rosalind said, like we all start somewhere. So we shouldn't be embarrassed by what we like, because I can tell you right now, I do not drink Apothic Red. If I see it, but you know, we all progress somewhere, and whether or not it was an error. I was also drinking Carlo Rossi.
And you've been deep with Gallup for a minute.
But you know, we all start somewhere. So if I'm gonna meet you where you're at because I've had my experience in there. But whether I like it or not doesn't mean you should or shouldn't. So be curious about wine, because there's so much of it out there that there's something for everybody. But we do have to foster this sense of curiosity when it comes to wine and when it comes to multiple other things that maybe wasn't for us but now can certainly be. To your question about climate change. Climate change, I'll stick to the last 3 years because they've been, or actually 4, because they've been significantly dramatic from year to year. But from fires to snow to frost into June to excessive rainfall, it can heavily skew your ability to have a great product and then to have product at all. So speaking to 23 specifically, we had snow into April. I was 9 months pregnant and was just like, yes, but we had snow below 1,000 feet elevation. So luckily it was a delayed bud break. We didn't have too much loss. But then fast forward, we had a super late harvest. So we had rain during that harvest. So people aren't able to even harvest some of that stuff. I wasn't able to harvest 200 tons because of the rotting on the vine. So this climate change can make or break a lot of producers. Not everyone can afford not to have a vintage of wine. There's so much investment that's way before that vintage and even after that vintage. So as a farmer, like, you have to stay flexible, and having those multiple avenues of resources is going to be it's going to be incredibly important to offset how volatile wine growing can be. But climate change has been quite dramatic, from drought to the snow, and a lot of vintages came up really short, like vintage 22 and 21. And then you have an over surplus of grapes last year. So you'll see this year, the market is really, really loose. There are people getting rid of different programs. There are people downsizing. There are some people even growing a little bit. But when you have huge shifts like that, some people this year will not be able to sell fruit. Some people this year will not be able to make all that wine. And then you're going to see the bulk wine market explode, and then prices are going to tank. So you're going to see a lot of fluctuations from how dramatic 22 was with very low yields to oversupply in 2023, and then 2024 currently is like, oh, well, we don't need it. So what do? There's been calls, especially like at Unified, to rip out Vineyard. So people were talking, there's been talk about ripping out Vineyards, but you can't make a permanent decision on the fluctuation of the market.
I don't think if you look statistically, you can't say the last 4 years are climate change. It's farming. You got to remember it's farming, and it's going to change. And I don't know, this is probably really a popular position. There are too many vineyards. There are just too many. When we came in here in 96, 97, we got in right before the next big swing up, and this, all of us county became vineyards. Thank God we got it when we did. But at some point, it's slowed down, right? And or arguably may have stopped, and there's probably too much planted until something happens, whether that means they're pulling out things,
or they're buying everybody up and everybody gets monopolized.
There you go. So
that's going to affect
and that's the economics behind it all. So, and let's never forget that, because that's what this is. And it's farming, and farming is
a business.
It's a business, and it's
business.
Yeah, and it's tough to do. I mean, when I look at Oregon and them not being able to get things right, that's climate change. This is variation. We from 2017 forward, we've had fires, we've had
15.
They're waiting on it in Oregon.
Huh?
They're waiting on it in Oregon.
Yeah.
'Cause they planted so far north.
Yeah.
Struggling to get things right.
Yeah, it means
30 years. They're like, weird hedge.
Yeah, right. How many of them are going to survive that? Yeah. So it's hard to know, but we still are. We're not in a bad spot. I mean, last year was weird, right? I mean, I think for the most part, most people. You just said we had an oversupply in 23, even though we had a very late harvest, and you weren't able. Some of the things you couldn't bring in. But we still had a very large supply of grapes.
Yeah.
So it's hard to make any kind of I think an estimation of where we're going to be this next year or the year after that.
Yeah, I don't think you see that. I don't think you can make something like, yes, this is for sure going to happen, but the fluctuation is going to be more dramatic for some people versus others. So for somebody on a very, very small scale, like that can be much more dramatic than a Gallo or a St. Michel or somebody larger.
The smaller boats are going to feel the waves of the ocean more.
Exactly.
Well, from that, we're gonna have to hold that out. Give this group a awesome hand.